Question 1. The investigation demonstrates that during the Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam, discrepancies were noted in the answer sheets of a significant number of candidates from a particular coaching center, raising concerns about potential malpractice. The university administration is under pressure to finalize admissions quickly to meet enrollment targets. Which approach best addresses this situation while adhering to the university's regulatory framework and ethical standards? Option A. Immediately disqualify all candidates from the identified coaching center to prevent further compromise of the examination's integrity and to send a strong deterrent message. Option B. Prioritize the finalization of admissions based on the enrollment targets and address any potential issues with the examination integrity only after the admission cycle is complete. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the examination process, including a detailed analysis of the suspicious answer sheets, cross-referencing with other examination data, and interviewing invigilators and relevant staff to establish factual grounds for any action. Option D. Classify the discrepancies as minor administrative errors and proceed with admissions, focusing on meeting the enrollment targets without further investigation. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the examination process, including a detailed analysis of the suspicious answer sheets, cross-referencing with other examination data, and interviewing invigilators and relevant staff to establish factual grounds for any action. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's need for accurate admissions data with the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of the entrance examination process. The pressure to meet enrollment targets can create an environment where shortcuts or biased assessments might be considered, but adherence to established protocols is paramount. Careful judgment is required to identify and address potential irregularities without compromising fairness or due process for all applicants. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial review of the examination process, focusing on objective evidence of any discrepancies or potential malpractices. This aligns with the principles of fairness, transparency, and accountability expected in academic admissions. Specifically, it requires a systematic investigation that considers all available data, interviews relevant parties, and adheres to the established examination guidelines and university policies. This ensures that any decisions made are based on factual findings and are defensible under the university's regulatory framework. An incorrect approach that involves immediately disqualifying candidates based on initial suspicions without a proper investigation fails to uphold the principle of natural justice. It bypasses the due process that every applicant is entitled to and could lead to the unfair exclusion of deserving candidates. This approach is ethically unsound and likely violates the university's own examination regulations, which would typically mandate a thorough inquiry before any punitive action is taken. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the concerns as minor administrative errors without further scrutiny, ignores the potential for systemic issues or deliberate misconduct. This can undermine the credibility of the entire admissions process and may allow irregularities to persist, potentially impacting future admission cycles. Ethically, it represents a failure to act with due diligence and a disregard for the integrity of the examination. A further incorrect approach, which is to focus solely on the perceived impact on enrollment numbers rather than the integrity of the examination, prioritizes institutional goals over ethical conduct and fairness. This can lead to decisions that are driven by expediency rather than by a commitment to upholding academic standards and equitable treatment of all applicants. It is a clear ethical failure to compromise the integrity of the admissions process for the sake of convenience or perceived institutional benefit. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the nature of the concern or irregularity. Second, consult the relevant university policies, examination guidelines, and any applicable regulatory frameworks. Third, gather all pertinent objective evidence. Fourth, conduct a fair and impartial investigation, which may include interviews and a review of documentation. Fifth, assess the findings against the established criteria and policies. Finally, make a decision based on the evidence and in accordance with the university's regulatory framework, ensuring transparency and fairness throughout the process. Question 2. The analysis reveals that the Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam aims to identify candidates with the strongest potential for academic success, Which of the following approaches best reflects the core purpose of such an entrance examination? Option A. Prioritizing applicants who can eloquently describe their future career goals, irrespective of their current academic preparedness. Option B. Assessing the applicant's demonstrated understanding of core subject matter and their capacity for critical thinking relevant to their chosen field of study. Option C. Gauging the applicant's familiarity with the university's ranking and its prominent alumni. Option D. Evaluating the applicant's ability to recall specific historical dates and scientific formulas without necessarily understanding their context or application. Correct answer is B. Assessing the applicant's demonstrated understanding of core subject matter and their capacity for critical thinking relevant to their chosen field of study. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the foundational principles and objectives of the Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam, specifically in relation to its role in selecting candidates. The challenge lies in identifying the approach that best aligns with the exam's purpose without resorting to superficial or misaligned criteria. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between genuine assessment of potential and methods that could inadvertently disadvantage or misrepresent candidates. The correct approach involves focusing on the exam's stated objectives, which are typically to assess academic aptitude, subject-specific knowledge, and the potential for success in higher education. This approach is right because it directly addresses the core purpose of an entrance examination: to identify individuals who possess the necessary foundational skills and knowledge to thrive in the academic environment of Adesh University. This aligns with the ethical principle of fairness and meritocracy, ensuring that selection is based on relevant capabilities. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the applicant's ability to memorize facts without understanding their application fails, because it prioritizes rote learning over critical thinking and analytical skills, which are crucial for higher education. This is ethically problematic as it does not accurately measure a candidate's true potential for academic success and may lead to the selection of less capable students. Another incorrect approach that emphasizes the applicant's familiarity with the university's campus and facilities is also professionally unacceptable. This criterion is irrelevant to academic potential and introduces an element of privilege or prior exposure that has no bearing on a candidate's suitability for study. It violates the principle of equal opportunity by favoring those who may have had the chance to visit the campus for reasons unrelated to their academic merit. A further incorrect approach that prioritizes the applicant's ability to articulate personal aspirations without demonstrating foundational knowledge is flawed because, while aspirations are important, they must be underpinned by a demonstrable capacity to achieve them. An entrance exam's primary function is to gauge this capacity. Focusing solely on articulation, without assessing underlying knowledge or aptitude, fails to fulfill the exam's purpose and could lead to the selection of candidates who lack the necessary academic grounding. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves first understanding the explicit and implicit goals of the assessment. Then, evaluate each potential approach against these goals, considering its relevance, fairness, and ethical implications. Prioritize approaches that directly measure the skills and knowledge deemed essential for success in the context of the assessment, ensuring that the process is objective and equitable. Question 3. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the current Adesh University Bathinda entrance examination process may not be adequately reflecting the academic potential of all eligible candidates. The university is considering several potential adjustments to the examination format and content. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for conducting university entrance examinations at Adesh University Bathinda, ensuring a fair and effective admissions process? Option A. Proceed with minor content adjustments to the examination based on the personal opinions of a few senior faculty members, without a systematic evaluation of their implications. Option B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of proposed changes, considering their effects on accessibility, fairness, and alignment with academic standards, while ensuring compliance with all Adesh University Bathinda examination guidelines. Option C. Prioritize changes that reduce the administrative burden and cost of conducting the examination, assuming that efficiency will indirectly benefit all stakeholders. Option D. Implement changes to the examination format based on the most frequently suggested modifications from a small, informal survey of current students, without a formal assessment of broader impacts. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of proposed changes, considering their effects on accessibility, fairness, and alignment with academic standards, while ensuring compliance with all Adesh University Bathinda examination guidelines. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the university, as an educational institution, has a responsibility to ensure its entrance examination process is fair, transparent, and adheres to all relevant regulations and guidelines set forth by Adesh University Bathinda. The feedback highlights a potential disconnect between the university's stated objectives and the actual student experience, necessitating a careful impact assessment to identify and address any shortcomings. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient admissions with the imperative to uphold academic integrity and stakeholder trust. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically evaluates the potential effects of proposed changes on various stakeholders, including prospective students, faculty, and the university administration. This assessment should consider how changes might affect accessibility, fairness, and the overall quality of the admissions process. Specifically, it requires a thorough review of the examination's alignment with Adesh University Bathinda's academic standards and any governing regulations or guidelines pertaining to entrance examinations. The ethical justification stems from the principle of fairness and the university's duty to provide an equitable opportunity for all eligible candidates. Regulatory compliance is paramount, ensuring that all examination procedures meet the standards set by Adesh University Bathinda and any relevant educational bodies. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the stakeholder feedback without proper investigation, as this fails to acknowledge potential issues and erodes trust. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the principles of transparency and accountability expected of an educational institution. Another incorrect approach is to implement changes solely based on administrative convenience or cost-saving measures, without considering their impact on the fairness and integrity of the examination process. This prioritizes operational efficiency over ethical considerations and regulatory adherence, potentially leading to discriminatory outcomes or a compromised admissions process. A further incorrect approach is to rely on anecdotal evidence or superficial reviews without a structured impact assessment. This lacks the rigor necessary to identify systemic problems and develop effective solutions, potentially leading to the perpetuation of existing issues or the creation of new ones. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with actively soliciting and carefully analyzing stakeholder feedback. This should be followed by a thorough impact assessment, considering all potential consequences of any proposed actions. The assessment must be grounded in the specific regulatory framework and guidelines of Adesh University Bathinda. Decisions should then be made based on the findings of this assessment, prioritizing fairness, transparency, and regulatory compliance. Continuous monitoring and evaluation are also crucial to ensure that implemented changes achieve their intended outcomes and do not create unintended negative consequences. Question 4. To address the challenge of a reported instance of academic misconduct by a student during the Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam, which of the following approaches best upholds the university's commitment to academic integrity and procedural fairness in accordance with relevant Indian higher education regulations? Option A. Publicly announcing the allegations and initiating an external review before any internal assessment or communication with the student. Option B. Conducting a thorough and impartial investigation, gathering evidence, providing the student an opportunity to respond, and then making a decision based on university policies and UGC guidelines. Option C. Dismissing the allegations outright without any form of investigation, assuming the report is unsubstantiated. Option D. Immediately imposing a severe penalty on the student based on the initial report without further inquiry. The correct answer is B. Conducting a thorough and impartial investigation, gathering evidence, providing the student an opportunity to respond, and then making a decision based on university policies and UGC guidelines. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge related to academic integrity and the ethical responsibilities of an institution. Adesh University, like any educational body, is bound by its own internal regulations. The overarching guidelines set by regulatory bodies governing higher education in India, such as the University Grants Commission (UGC), and general principles of fairness and due process. The challenge lies in balancing the need to uphold academic standards and prevent misconduct with the requirement to conduct a fair and impartial investigation, ensuring that all parties are treated equitably and that decisions are based on evidence. Careful judgment is required to avoid prejudging the situation or making decisions that could be perceived as biased or lacking in procedural fairness. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based investigation. This entails gathering all relevant information, providing the accused student with an opportunity to present their case, and then making a decision based on the findings and established university policies. This aligns with the principles of natural justice, which are implicitly or explicitly embedded in the regulatory frameworks governing educational institutions in India. Specifically, the UGC's guidelines on academic integrity and institutional mechanisms for addressing student grievances would be paramount. This approach ensures transparency, fairness, and accountability, thereby protecting the reputation of the university and the rights of the student. An incorrect approach that involves immediate disciplinary action without a thorough investigation fails to adhere to due process. This would violate the principles of natural justice and potentially contravene university regulations that mandate a fair inquiry. Such an action could lead to legal challenges and damage the university's credibility. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the allegations without any inquiry, demonstrates a disregard for academic integrity and the university's responsibility to maintain high standards. This would undermine the trust placed in the institution by students, faculty, and the wider academic community, and could also be in violation of UGC directives on academic misconduct. A third incorrect approach, which is to involve external parties prematurely without following internal procedures, could compromise the confidentiality of the process and potentially prejudice the investigation. While external consultation might be necessary at later stages, initiating it without a proper internal assessment and adherence to university protocols is procedurally flawed and could be seen as an abdication of institutional responsibility. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's academic misconduct policies, the relevant UGC guidelines, and the principles of natural justice. It requires a commitment to impartiality, thoroughness, and fairness. Professionals should follow a structured approach. First, acknowledge and record the allegation. Second, initiate a preliminary assessment to determine if a formal investigation is warranted. Third, conduct a comprehensive and impartial investigation, ensuring all parties have a chance to be heard. Fourth, review the evidence and make a decision based on established policies and regulations. And finally, communicate the decision and any subsequent actions clearly and transparently. Question 5. The review process indicates a backlog in processing applications for the Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam, leading to pressure to expedite the final selection of candidates. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of fair and transparent admissions as mandated by Adesh University's entrance exam framework? Option A. Ensure all applications are reviewed against the complete set of admission criteria outlined in the Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam guidelines, with a focus on consistent application of these standards for every candidate, regardless of processing time. Option B. Implement a tiered review system where a subset of applications are thoroughly vetted against all criteria, while the remaining applications are approved based on a statistical probability of meeting the requirements. Option C. Conduct a rapid initial screening of applications, prioritizing those that appear most promising based on a quick glance at key academic scores, and deferring detailed review of others until later. Option D. Expedite the process by relying on recommendations from faculty members who may have prior informal knowledge of some applicants, supplementing this with a cursory review of submitted documents. The correct answer is C. Conduct a rapid initial screening of applications, prioritizing those that appear most promising based on a quick glance at key academic scores, and deferring detailed review of others until later. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the university's need for timely admissions decisions with the ethical obligation to ensure all applicants are assessed fairly and without prejudice, adhering to Adesh University's established entrance exam guidelines. The pressure to expedite the process, while understandable from an administrative standpoint, can lead to overlooking crucial aspects of the application or potentially introducing bias if not managed carefully. The correct approach involves a systematic review of all submitted documents against the defined criteria of the Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam. This ensures that each applicant's eligibility and merit are evaluated consistently, as per the university's published admission regulations and the specific requirements of the entrance exam. This methodical process upholds fairness, transparency, and the integrity of the admissions process, aligning with the principles of good governance and academic standards expected by Adesh University. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness risks overlooking critical information or failing to apply the admission criteria uniformly. This could lead to the rejection of deserving candidates or the acceptance of ineligible ones, undermining the credibility of the entrance exam and potentially violating the university's own admission policies. Another incorrect approach that involves making assumptions about an applicant's background or potential without verifying it against the provided documentation is ethically unsound and directly contravenes the principle of objective assessment. Such actions can introduce bias and lead to discriminatory outcomes, which are unacceptable in any academic selection process. Professionals tasked with admissions should adopt a decision-making framework that emphasizes adherence to established protocols, objective evaluation, and fairness. This involves understanding the specific regulations of the Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam, meticulously reviewing all submitted materials, and applying the criteria consistently to every applicant. When faced with time pressures, the focus should remain on efficient execution of the established process rather than compromising its integrity. Question 6. What factors determine the holistic assessment of an applicant's suitability for admission to Adesh University Bathinda, considering both academic achievements and extracurricular engagement? Option A. Exclusive consideration of the highest marks achieved in any academic subject, irrespective of performance in other subjects or the overall academic record. Option B. Prioritization of the sheer number of extracurricular activities listed on an application, without regard for the depth of involvement or leadership demonstrated. Option C. A comprehensive review of academic transcripts, including subject performance trends and consistency, coupled with an in-depth evaluation of the quality and impact of extracurricular activities, leadership roles, and demonstrated personal development. Option D. Sole reliance on the applicant's stated future career goals, without correlating them to their academic background or demonstrated skills and experiences. The correct answer is C. A comprehensive review of academic transcripts, including subject performance trends and consistency, coupled with an in-depth evaluation of the quality and impact of extracurricular activities, leadership roles, and demonstrated personal development. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of how their past academic performance and extracurricular involvement can be interpreted as indicators of future success and suitability for Adesh University Bathinda. The university's admissions committee must assess not just raw scores, but also the qualitative aspects of an applicant's profile, balancing academic rigor with broader developmental experiences. Careful judgment is required to avoid biases and to ensure a holistic evaluation that aligns with the university's mission and values. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of academic records, including subject choices and performance trends, alongside a thorough evaluation of extracurricular activities, leadership roles, and any demonstrated commitment to community or personal development. This approach is justified by the university's likely objective to admit students who are not only academically capable, but also well-rounded, possess leadership potential, and are likely to contribute positively to the university community. This aligns with the general principles of holistic admissions, which aim to identify candidates with a broad range of skills and attributes beyond mere academic scores, fostering a diverse and dynamic student body. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the highest achieved marks in specific subjects, while ignoring performance in other areas or the context of those marks, fails to capture the applicant's full academic profile and potential. This overlooks the possibility that a student might excel in certain areas due to passion or aptitude, while still demonstrating a strong overall capacity for learning. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes participation in a large number of extracurricular activities without considering the depth of involvement, leadership demonstrated, or the impact of those activities, is also flawed. Mere participation does not equate to meaningful engagement or the development of valuable skills. This approach risks valuing quantity over quality and may not accurately reflect an applicant's commitment or potential for contribution. A third incorrect approach that exclusively considers the applicant's stated career aspirations without linking them to their academic background or demonstrated skills is inadequate. While aspirations are important, they must be grounded in a realistic assessment of the applicant's current capabilities and past experiences. This approach fails to assess the applicant's preparedness and the likelihood of achieving those aspirations through the university's programs. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves establishing clear evaluation criteria that balance academic merit with personal attributes and potential. This includes developing rubrics for assessing academic transcripts, interview responses, if applicable, and extracurricular involvement. It also necessitates training admissions officers to identify and mitigate personal biases, ensuring a fair and consistent evaluation process for all applicants. The goal is to identify individuals who will thrive academically and contribute meaningfully to the university's intellectual and social environment. Question 7. Benchmark analysis indicates that a prominent educational technology company has offered substantial sponsorship for the Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam, contingent on their branding being prominently featured, and a commitment from the university to explore their assessment tools for future admissions. What is the most prudent approach for Adesh University Bathinda to manage this sponsorship offer while upholding the integrity of its entrance examination? Option A. Accept the sponsorship with minimal conditions, primarily focusing on the branding aspect and deferring any discussion about the assessment tools to a later date. Option B. Decline the sponsorship offer outright to avoid any potential complications or perceptions of bias. Without further discussion with the potential sponsor, Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the sponsorship on the examination's fairness and impartiality, engaging with the sponsor to define clear boundaries and safeguards, and seeking approval from the relevant academic and administrative bodies before acceptance. Option D. Immediately accept the sponsorship to secure the financial benefits, assuming the sponsor's intentions are purely promotional and will not influence the examination process. Correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the sponsorship on the examination's fairness and impartiality, engaging with the sponsor to define clear boundaries and safeguards, and seeking approval from the relevant academic and administrative bodies before acceptance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate need for funding and the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of the admission process. The entrance exam is a critical gatekeeper, and any compromise, even perceived, can erode public trust and the reputation of Adesh University Bathinda. The core of the challenge lies in balancing resource constraints with the non-negotiable requirement of fairness and transparency in admissions. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the proposed sponsorship, focusing on its potential impact on the examination's integrity and fairness. This requires a proactive engagement with the sponsor to understand their intentions and to establish clear boundaries and safeguards. The university must prioritize its regulatory obligations and ethical commitments to all prospective students. Specifically, adherence to the guidelines set forth by Adesh University Bathinda's Governing Academic Council and any relevant national educational regulatory bodies, if applicable to the exam's jurisdiction, would mandate that any external influence must not compromise the impartiality of the examination. This approach ensures that the university upholds its commitment to merit-based admissions and avoids any appearance of impropriety, thereby protecting its academic standing. An incorrect approach would be to accept the sponsorship without a rigorous impact assessment, assuming the sponsor's intentions are benign. This failure to scrutinize the proposal violates the ethical principle of due diligence and could lead to regulatory scrutiny if the sponsorship is later found to influence the exam content or administration. Another incorrect approach is to reject the sponsorship outright without exploring potential avenues for collaboration that could benefit the university without compromising the exam's integrity. This misses an opportunity for potentially valuable partnerships and demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and resource management. Finally, accepting the sponsorship with minimal oversight, such as merely ensuring the sponsor's logo is displayed, is also professionally unsound. This superficial approach fails to address the substantive risks of undue influence and could still lead to perceptions of bias or unfair advantage, thereby undermining the credibility of the entrance examination. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a multi-stakeholder consultation, including academic leadership, legal counsel, and admissions committees. A risk-based assessment framework should be employed, identifying potential threats to the exam's integrity and developing mitigation strategies. Transparency in communication with all stakeholders, including potential sponsors and applicants, is paramount. The ultimate decision must be guided by the university's mission, values, and adherence to all applicable regulatory and ethical standards governing higher education admissions. Question 8. Market research demonstrates that a significant number of prospective students who have applied to Adesh University Bathinda are also considering other institutions. To improve enrollment numbers, there is a proposal to utilize the contact information collected during the application process to send targeted promotional materials about Adesh University's unique programs and scholarships. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and ethical considerations for handling applicant data? Option A. Share the applicant database with external marketing agencies specializing in student recruitment to leverage their expertise in reaching potential students. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive data privacy impact assessment to evaluate the risks and compliance requirements before initiating any targeted marketing campaigns, ensuring all data usage adheres to Adesh University's policies and relevant Indian data protection laws. Option C. Focus marketing efforts on publicly available data and general demographic trends, avoiding any direct use of applicant-specific information from the admission process. Option D. Immediately begin sending promotional emails and SMS messages to all applicants using their provided contact details to highlight the university's advantages. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive data privacy impact assessment to evaluate the risks and compliance requirements before initiating any targeted marketing campaigns, ensuring all data usage adheres to Adesh University's policies and relevant Indian data protection laws. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape surrounding the use of university entrance exam data for marketing purposes. The core tension lies between the university's legitimate interest in attracting prospective students and the imperative to protect the privacy and confidentiality of applicant information, as mandated by relevant regulations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any marketing activities are conducted responsibly and in compliance with the law. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment that prioritizes data privacy and compliance. This approach is right because it proactively identifies potential risks associated with using applicant data for marketing, such as breaches of confidentiality or contravention of data protection laws. By conducting this assessment, the individual ensures that any proposed marketing strategies are evaluated against established legal and ethical standards before implementation. This aligns with the principles of responsible data handling and demonstrates a commitment to upholding the trust placed in the university by its applicants. Specifically, it would involve reviewing Adesh University's internal policies on data usage, any applicable Punjab government regulations concerning student data, and general Indian data protection principles to ensure consent mechanisms are robust and data is anonymized or aggregated where appropriate. An incorrect approach that involves immediately using applicant data for targeted marketing without a prior impact assessment is ethically and regulatorily flawed. This failure stems from a disregard for data privacy principles and potentially violates laws governing the use of personal information. Such an action could lead to significant reputational damage for the university and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach, which is to share applicant data with third-party marketing firms without explicit consent or a clear data sharing agreement, represents a severe breach of confidentiality and data protection regulations. This action exposes applicant information to unauthorized access and misuse, undermining the trust of prospective students and violating their privacy rights. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on maximizing marketing reach without considering the ethical implications of data usage is professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the regulatory framework and ethical responsibilities associated with handling sensitive applicant information, prioritizing commercial gain over the protection of individual privacy. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the regulatory environment and ethical obligations. This involves identifying all relevant laws and guidelines, such as those pertaining to data protection and privacy specific to educational institutions in Punjab, India. Subsequently, a risk-based approach, such as an impact assessment, should be employed to evaluate potential consequences of any proposed action. This framework emphasizes proactive compliance, ethical considerations, and the protection of individual rights, ensuring that decisions are both legally sound and morally defensible. Question 9. The risk matrix shows a candidate for Adesh University Bathinda's entrance exam has scored just below the standard cutoff for a competitive program, but their application highlights significant personal challenges faced during the exam period. The admissions committee is considering whether to offer admission, which approach best balances academic standards with fairness and potential. Option A. Offer admission immediately to the candidate, prioritizing their potential future contributions over the entrance exam score. Option B. Offer admission after a thorough review of the applicant's entire profile, including their explanation for the lower score, and document the decision-making process. Option C. Admit the candidate without further discussion or documentation, assuming the personal challenges are sufficient justification. Option D. Reject the applicant solely based on their failure to meet the minimum cutoff score, as per the established guidelines. Correct answer is B. Offer admission after a thorough review of the applicant's entire profile, including their explanation for the lower score, and document the decision-making process. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of managing admissions and potential resource constraints. The admissions committee must make a judgment call based on incomplete information, where a strict adherence to a single criterion might lead to overlooking a deserving candidate, while excessive leniency could compromise the academic standards of Adesh University Bathinda. The core ethical consideration is fairness and the principle of providing equal opportunity while upholding the university's mission. The correct approach involves a holistic review of the applicant's profile, considering the mitigating circumstances presented. This aligns with the ethical principle of fairness and the implicit understanding that entrance exams are designed to assess potential, not just rote memorization or performance on a single day. Regulatory guidelines for university admissions, while not explicitly detailed here as specific Adesh University, Bathinda entrance exam regulations are not provided. Generally emphasize a comprehensive evaluation process that allows for consideration of extenuating factors. This approach demonstrates a commitment to identifying candidates who, despite a suboptimal performance on one metric, possess the potential to succeed academically and contribute to the university community. An incorrect approach would be to rigidly apply the cutoff score without any further consideration. This fails to acknowledge that entrance exams are a snapshot and can be influenced by external factors, potentially excluding a candidate who might otherwise be a strong contributor. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of empathy and a failure to adhere to the spirit of fair assessment. Another incorrect approach would be to bypass the entrance exam entirely for this candidate based on a single factor, such as a perceived future contribution. This undermines the integrity of the entrance examination process and could be perceived as preferential treatment, violating principles of equal opportunity and fair competition. A third incorrect approach would be to admit the candidate without any internal discussion or documentation of the decision-making process. This lacks transparency and accountability, making it difficult to justify the admission if questioned and potentially setting a precedent for arbitrary decision-making. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the established admission criteria and the flexibility, if any, allowed within those guidelines. They should then gather all available information about the applicant, including any explanations for performance deviations. A structured discussion among the admissions committee, focusing on the applicant's overall potential and the rationale for any deviation from standard procedure, is crucial. Documenting the decision-making process, including the factors considered and the justification for the final outcome, ensures transparency and accountability. Question 10. Stakeholder feedback indicates a perception that the current Adesh University Bathinda entrance examination selection criteria may not be fully reflective of the diverse academic backgrounds and potential of all applicants, potentially disadvantaging certain groups. Which of the following approaches best addresses this concern while upholding the integrity of the admissions process? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive review of the existing entrance examination selection criteria, gathering data on applicant performance across different demographic and academic backgrounds, and consulting with faculty and admissions experts to propose evidence-based adjustments that enhance fairness and predictive validity. Option B. Issue a public statement clarifying that the current selection criteria are already optimal and that the feedback is based on misunderstandings of the examination's purpose. Option C. Implement a new, complex scoring system based on a broad range of qualitative factors that are difficult to standardize and measure objectively. Option D. Immediately revise the selection criteria to lower the overall cutoff scores to accommodate a wider range of applicants, aiming to increase overall enrollment numbers. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive review of the existing entrance examination selection criteria, gathering data on applicant performance across different demographic and academic backgrounds, and consulting with faculty and admissions experts to propose evidence-based adjustments that enhance fairness and predictive validity. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the need to balance the university's strategic goals with the ethical considerations of student admissions and the integrity of the entrance examination process. The university must ensure that its admissions policies are fair, transparent, and aligned with its mission, while also responding to feedback from key stakeholders. Careful judgment is required to avoid compromising academic standards or creating an inequitable admissions environment. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the admissions policy, focusing on objective criteria and ensuring alignment with the university's stated mission and values. This approach is professionally sound because it directly addresses the stakeholder feedback by initiating a structured and evidence-based evaluation. It prioritizes fairness and transparency in the admissions process, which are fundamental ethical principles in higher education. Furthermore, it allows for data-driven decision-making, ensuring that any proposed changes are well justified and likely to improve the admissions process without undermining its integrity. This aligns with the general principles of good governance and ethical practice expected of educational institutions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on increasing the number of admissions without a thorough review of the underlying policy risks, compromising academic standards, and potentially introducing bias. This fails to address the root cause of any dissatisfaction indicated by stakeholder feedback and could lead to a perception of a less rigorous or meritocratic admission system. Another incorrect approach that involves immediately implementing changes based on anecdotal feedback without a systematic review is professionally unsound. This bypasses the necessary due diligence, potentially leading to poorly conceived policies that could have unintended negative consequences. It lacks the rigor required for significant policy changes and may not genuinely address the concerns raised by stakeholders. A further incorrect approach that dismisses stakeholder feedback as irrelevant or misinformed is ethically problematic and professionally damaging. It signals a lack of responsiveness and respect for the university community, potentially eroding trust and hindering future collaboration. Effective professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic process. First, acknowledging and understanding the feedback. Second, gathering relevant data and evidence. Third, analyzing the current policies and their impact. Fourth, developing potential solutions that are ethically sound and strategically aligned. And finally, implementing and monitoring the chosen course of action. Question 11. Stakeholder feedback indicates concerns regarding the perceived fairness and transparency of the Adesh University Bathinda entrance examination process for undergraduate admissions. As a member of the admissions committee, what is the most appropriate course of action to address these concerns while upholding the integrity of the examination? Option A. Implement changes to the examination process based on the feedback, but refrain from communicating the specific reasons for these changes to avoid further debate. Option B. Immediately revise the admission criteria and examination format to appease the vocal stakeholders without a formal review process. Option C. Dismiss all stakeholder feedback as subjective and maintain the current examination process without any modifications or further investigation. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the feedback. Cross-reference it with existing admission policies and examination guidelines, and communicate any findings or necessary adjustments transparently to stakeholders. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the feedback. Cross-reference it with existing admission policies and examination guidelines, and communicate any findings or necessary adjustments transparently to stakeholders. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need to address legitimate concerns raised by stakeholders with the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair admission processes. The university must respond to feedback without compromising its established procedures or appearing to be swayed by undue pressure, which could undermine its reputation and the trust placed in its entrance examinations. Careful judgment is required to differentiate between constructive criticism and attempts to manipulate the process. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the feedback, cross-referencing it with existing admission policies and examination guidelines, and then communicating any findings or necessary adjustments transparently. This approach upholds the principles of fairness and due process inherent in university admissions. It aligns with the ethical obligation to maintain the integrity of the selection process and to treat all applicants equitably. Specifically, it reflects a commitment to evidence-based decision-making and accountability, which are foundational to good governance in educational institutions. An incorrect approach that involves immediately revising admission criteria based solely on a vocal minority of stakeholder feedback fails to acknowledge the established procedures and the potential for bias. This could lead to an unfair advantage for some applicants and a disadvantage for others, violating principles of equal opportunity. It also risks setting a precedent where future admission processes can be influenced by external pressure rather than objective merit. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss all stakeholder feedback without proper consideration, demonstrates a lack of responsiveness and engagement. This can lead to a perception of arrogance or indifference on the part of the university, potentially damaging its relationship with its stakeholders and the wider community. It also misses an opportunity to identify genuine flaws or areas for improvement in the admission process. A third incorrect approach, which is to implement changes without clear communication or justification, creates confusion and mistrust. Stakeholders and applicants need to understand the rationale behind any modifications to the admission process to maintain confidence in the university's operations. Lack of transparency can be perceived as a sign of impropriety or a lack of preparedness. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured response mechanism. First, acknowledge receipt of all feedback. Second, categorize and analyze the feedback to identify recurring themes and specific concerns. Third, consult relevant university policies, academic regulations, and any applicable guidelines from regulatory bodies governing university admissions in India. Fourth, assess the validity and impact of the feedback against these established frameworks. Fifth, if changes are deemed necessary, develop a clear plan for implementation, ensuring fairness and equity. Finally, communicate any decisions and their rationale transparently to all relevant stakeholders. Question 12. Stakeholder feedback indicates concerns regarding the perceived fairness of certain admission outcomes in the Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam, with some suggesting that borderline candidates may have been unfairly excluded. What is the most appropriate initial step for the university administration to take in response to this feedback? Option A. Publicly state that the entrance exam results are final and that no further reviews will be conducted to maintain the integrity of the examination process. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive review of all borderline cases against the established Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam admission criteria and examination guidelines to ascertain any procedural discrepancies or misinterpretations of the rules. Option C. Immediately offer a re-evaluation of all borderline cases to address stakeholder concerns and demonstrate responsiveness, irrespective of a prior systematic review. Option D. Prioritize addressing the feedback from the most vocal stakeholder groups to manage public perception and mitigate potential negative publicity. The correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive review of all borderline cases against the established Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam admission criteria and examination guidelines to ascertain any procedural discrepancies or misinterpretations of the rules. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need to address legitimate concerns raised by stakeholders with the university's established admission policies and the integrity of the entrance examination process. A hasty or biased response could undermine trust in Adesh University's admissions, while ignoring valid feedback could lead to perceived unfairness. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any action taken is both procedurally fair and aligned with the university's regulatory framework. The correct approach involves a thorough, impartial review of the feedback against the established Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam regulations. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes adherence to the defined admission criteria and examination procedures, which are the governing documents for the entrance exam. By systematically evaluating the feedback within this framework, the university can determine if any irregularities occurred or if the feedback highlights areas for future improvement without compromising the current admission cycle's fairness. This aligns with the ethical principle of fairness and the regulatory requirement to conduct admissions according to prescribed rules, an approach that immediately proposes re-evaluation of all borderline cases based solely on the feedback, without a prior systematic review against the regulations, is professionally flawed. This bypasses the established admission criteria and introduces subjectivity, potentially leading to arbitrary decisions and undermining the standardized nature of the entrance exam. It fails to uphold the principle of equal treatment for all candidates by creating a special review process not outlined in the regulations. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss all feedback outright, citing the finality of the exam results. While exam results are typically considered final, this stance fails to acknowledge the university's responsibility to investigate credible concerns that might indicate systemic issues or procedural errors. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of responsiveness to stakeholders and a disregard for potential fairness issues, potentially damaging the university's reputation. Finally, an approach that focuses on appeasing the loudest voices without a structured review is also professionally unacceptable. This prioritizes public relations over procedural fairness and adherence to regulations. It risks setting a precedent where feedback, rather than established rules, dictates admission outcomes, leading to inconsistency and a loss of confidence in the examination's integrity. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Acknowledging the feedback received. 2. Consulting the relevant university regulations and admission policies for the entrance exam. 3. Conducting an objective assessment of the feedback against these regulations. 4. Determining if the feedback points to a violation of rules, a need for clarification, or an area for future policy enhancement. 5. Communicating the findings and any subsequent actions transparently, in accordance with university policy. Question 13. The monitoring system demonstrates the capability to record audio and video of candidates during the Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory and ethical requirements for data collection and privacy? Option A. Activating audio and video recording for all candidates without prior notification, and only addressing privacy concerns if a candidate raises them. Option B. Monitoring only audio during the exam and only recording video if a specific irregularity is suspected, without informing candidates about either. Option C. Recording audio and video of candidates without explicit consent, but assuring them that the data will be anonymized and used only for statistical analysis. Option D. Informing candidates in advance about the audio and video recording, its purpose for ensuring exam integrity, and obtaining their explicit consent before the exam commences. The correct answer is D. Informing candidates in advance about the audio and video recording, its purpose for ensuring exam integrity, and obtaining their explicit consent before the exam commences. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations concerning data privacy and consent. The university entrance exam context implies a need for fair and transparent assessment processes, but also necessitates adherence to data protection principles that are likely governed by Indian law, given the university's location. The core of the challenge lies in determining the appropriate scope of data collection and usage without infringing upon the rights of prospective students. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy regarding the monitoring system's capabilities and purpose. This aligns with the principles of informed consent and data minimization, which are fundamental to data protection regulations. Specifically, it requires clearly informing candidates about what data is being collected, why it is being collected, e.g., to ensure exam integrity, how it will be used, and for how long it will be retained. Obtaining explicit consent before activating any monitoring that captures personal data is paramount. This approach upholds the ethical duty to respect individual privacy and complies with likely data protection laws in India, which emphasize consent and transparency. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with comprehensive monitoring without prior notification or consent. This constitutes a significant breach of privacy and likely violates data protection laws that require explicit consent for data processing. Such an action erodes trust and could lead to legal repercussions and reputational damage for the university. Another incorrect approach would be to monitor only passively without any clear communication about the system's existence or purpose. While seemingly less intrusive than active monitoring without consent, this still fails to meet the transparency requirements of data protection. Candidates have a right to know they are being monitored and why. A third incorrect approach would be to collect data broadly and then decide later how to use it. This violates the principle of data minimization and purpose limitation, which dictates that data should only be collected for specific, legitimate purposes and not used for unrelated reasons. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a thorough understanding of the relevant legal and ethical frameworks governing data privacy and consent. This includes consulting with legal counsel to ensure compliance with Indian data protection laws. A risk assessment should be conducted to identify potential privacy harms. Subsequently, a clear policy should be developed that outlines the scope of monitoring, the data collected, the purpose of collection, consent mechanisms, data retention periods, and security measures. Communication with candidates must be clear, concise, and easily accessible, ensuring they can make an informed decision about their participation. Question 14. Stakeholder feedback indicates a significant increase in the number of applications for the upcoming academic year at Adesh University, Bathinda, leading to concerns about the capacity of the current admission process to handle the volume efficiently and effectively. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation while upholding the university's commitment to academic excellence and fair admissions? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of potential modifications to the admission process, including data analysis of applicant profiles and projected resource implications, before proposing any changes. Option B. Immediately relax admission criteria to accommodate a larger number of students, prioritizing speed and volume over academic rigor. Option C. Implement a lottery system for all applicants to ensure fairness and speed, regardless of academic merit. Option D. Postpone any review of the admission process until after the current admission cycle is completed, to avoid disrupting the existing workflow. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of potential modifications to the admission process, including data analysis of applicant profiles and projected resource implications, before proposing any changes. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the university, as an educational institution, has a responsibility to uphold academic integrity and ensure fair admission processes. The feedback highlights a potential conflict between the desire to accommodate a large number of applicants and the need to maintain rigorous admission standards. The challenge lies in balancing stakeholder expectations, applicants, parents, faculty, administration, with the university's commitment to quality education and its regulatory obligations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any changes to the admission process are both effective and compliant with Adesh University's established guidelines and any relevant governing educational policies. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven impact assessment of proposed changes to the admission process. This approach prioritizes understanding the potential consequences of altering admission criteria or procedures before implementation. It involves gathering feedback from various stakeholders, analyzing the potential effects on applicant quality, faculty workload, resource allocation, and the overall reputation of Adesh University. This aligns with principles of good governance and responsible institutional management, ensuring that decisions are informed and serve the best interests of the university and its students, while also adhering to any applicable regulatory frameworks governing university admissions in India. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement changes based solely on the volume of applications without a thorough assessment. This could lead to a decline in the academic caliber of admitted students, potentially impacting the university's ranking and the value of its degrees. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the stakeholder feedback entirely, ignoring valuable insights that could lead to improvements. This demonstrates a lack of responsiveness and could alienate key stakeholders. A third incorrect approach would be to make arbitrary changes without clear objectives or a plan for evaluation, which would be inefficient and unlikely to address the underlying issues effectively. These approaches fail to demonstrate due diligence and a commitment to evidence-based decision-making, which are crucial for maintaining institutional credibility and compliance. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem or opportunity, gathering relevant information, including stakeholder feedback and data, analyzing potential solutions and their impacts, consulting with relevant parties, making a well-reasoned decision, implementing the chosen solution, and finally, evaluating its effectiveness. This iterative process ensures that decisions are not only compliant, but also strategically sound and aligned with the institution's mission and values. Question 15. Stakeholder feedback indicates a potential perception of bias in the recent entrance examination scoring for a popular program at Adesh University, Bathinda. What is the most appropriate initial step for the university administration to take in response to this feedback? Option A. Issue a public statement assuring stakeholders that the examination process is fair and unbiased, pending further internal review. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive, data-driven impact assessment of the scoring process, including a review of examination materials, marking schemes, and statistical analysis of results to identify any systemic issues or anomalies. Option C. Form a committee to discuss the feedback informally and decide on a course of action based on general consensus. Option D. Immediately revise the scoring algorithm for future examinations to address the perceived bias, without a detailed review of the current process. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive, data-driven impact assessment of the scoring process, including a review of examination materials, marking schemes, and statistical analysis of results, to identify any systemic issues or anomalies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the need to balance the university's strategic objectives with the ethical considerations and regulatory compliance related to student admissions and program integrity. Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam regulations, while not explicitly detailed here, are understood to prioritize fairness, transparency, and meritocracy in the admission process. The university must ensure that its decision-making processes are robust and defensible, especially when faced with feedback that suggests potential biases or deviations from established norms. The correct approach involves a thorough, objective, and evidence-based impact assessment. This means systematically evaluating the potential consequences of proposed changes on all relevant stakeholders, including students, faculty, staff, and the university's reputation. Such an assessment would involve gathering data, analyzing trends, and considering various scenarios to understand the multifaceted implications. This aligns with the overarching principles of good governance and responsible institutional management, which are implicitly expected under any university's regulatory framework, including that of Adesh University. The focus is on proactive risk identification and mitigation, ensuring that any changes are implemented in a manner that upholds the integrity of the admission process and student welfare. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the feedback without proper investigation. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for stakeholder concerns, potentially leading to reputational damage and erosion of trust. Another incorrect approach would be to implement changes based solely on anecdotal evidence or pressure from a vocal minority without a comprehensive impact assessment. This risks making decisions that are not data-driven, may have unintended negative consequences, and could violate the spirit, if not the letter, of admission regulations that aim for equitable access and fair evaluation. Furthermore, making decisions without considering the broader implications for program quality or resource allocation would be professionally unsound and could lead to operational inefficiencies or a decline in academic standards. A professional decision-making process in such situation should involve a structured approach. First, acknowledging and documenting all stakeholder feedback. Second, initiating a formal review process that includes a comprehensive impact assessment. Third, consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations. Fourth, developing a range of potential solutions or responses. And finally, selecting the most appropriate course of action based on evidence, ethical considerations, and regulatory compliance, with clear communication to all stakeholders. Question 16. Stakeholder feedback indicates a potential perception of bias in the recent Adesh University Bathinda entrance examination results, with concerns raised about the fairness of the selection process. A prominent educational consultancy has approached the university with a proposal offering substantial financial support for infrastructure development in exchange for a commitment to admit a predetermined number of students from their recommended pool, without requiring them to undergo the full standard entrance examination process, which approach best upholds the integrity of the Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam and its regulatory framework. Option A. Implement a minor adjustment to the scoring mechanism for future exams to address the feedback, while proceeding with the consultancy's proposal to leverage the financial benefits for immediate university development. Option B. Accept the educational consultancy's proposal to secure immediate funding for infrastructure development, as this will benefit the university's long-term growth and reputation, and the consultancy's recommendations are generally considered reliable. Option C. Publicly dismiss the stakeholder feedback as unsubstantiated concerns to maintain the university's image, and proceed with the consultancy's funding offer without further investigation. Option D. Initiate a comprehensive review of the admission process, including an analysis of the feedback received and the adherence to Adesh University Bathinda's established admission policies, to identify and address any systemic issues or potential biases, while deferring any decisions on external funding proposals until the review is complete. The correct answer is D. Initiate a comprehensive review of the admission process, including an analysis of the feedback received and the adherence to Adesh University Bathinda's established admission policies, to identify and address any systemic issues or potential biases, while deferring any decisions on external funding proposals until the review is complete. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate need for funding and the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of the admission process. The decision-maker must balance financial imperatives with the principles of fairness, transparency, and meritocracy, all of which are implicitly or explicitly governed by the regulatory framework of Adesh University Bathinda's entrance exam. Careful judgment is required to avoid actions that could compromise the university's reputation or lead to legal challenges. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial review of the admission process, focusing on identifying systemic weaknesses or potential biases that could have led to the observed outcomes. This approach aligns with the principles of good governance and academic integrity, which are foundational to any reputable educational institution. Specifically, it necessitates adherence to Adesh University Bathinda's established admission policies and procedures, ensuring that any review is conducted transparently and without prejudice. The ethical imperative is to uphold the fairness of the entrance exam, ensuring that all candidates are evaluated on their merits. This proactive and investigative stance is crucial for maintaining trust among students, faculty, and the wider community. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate financial gains over process integrity would be ethically unsound and potentially violate the spirit, if not the letter, of Adesh University Bathinda's admission regulations. For instance, accepting a proposal that offers significant funding in exchange for a guaranteed number of admissions, without a rigorous review of the candidate's qualifications or the fairness of the selection process, would be a clear ethical failure. This could be seen as a form of undue influence or a compromise of academic standards, potentially leading to a perception of corruption or favorability, which undermines the credibility of the entrance exam. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the feedback without proper investigation, thereby ignoring potential systemic issues and failing to uphold the university's responsibility to its stakeholders. This inaction could lead to the perpetuation of unfair practices and damage the university's reputation. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a systematic evaluation of stakeholder feedback, a review of relevant university policies and regulations pertaining to admissions, and an objective assessment of the potential impact of any proposed actions. It requires prioritizing ethical considerations and regulatory compliance over short-term benefits. A structured approach would involve forming a committee to investigate the feedback, analyzing the admission data for any anomalies, and recommending corrective actions if necessary, all while ensuring transparency and fairness. Question 17. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the current admission brochure for the upcoming academic year may not fully reflect the updated eligibility criteria for certain postgraduate programs, potentially leading to confusion among prospective applicants. Which of the following actions best addresses this concern while adhering to ethical and regulatory standards for educational institutions? Option A. Dismiss the feedback as a minor issue, assuming that applicants will eventually discover the correct criteria once they are admitted. Option B. Advise the admissions team to verbally inform applicants about the updated criteria during counseling sessions, without making any changes to the printed or online materials. Option C. Issue a supplementary notice clarifying the eligibility criteria without revising the existing brochure, assuming most applicants will see the notice. Option D. Immediately initiate a comprehensive review of the admission brochure and university website to ensure all program eligibility criteria are accurately and clearly stated, and update materials as necessary before further distribution. The correct answer is D. Immediately initiate a comprehensive review of the admission brochure and university website to ensure all program eligibility criteria are accurately and clearly stated, and update materials as necessary before further distribution. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's need for student enrollment with the ethical obligation to provide accurate and non-misleading information to prospective students. The pressure to meet enrollment targets can create a temptation to downplay or omit crucial details about program limitations or admission criteria, which could lead to student dissatisfaction and potential regulatory scrutiny. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all communications are transparent and align with the Adesh University's stated mission and any applicable regulatory guidelines for educational institutions in India. The correct approach involves proactively addressing the stakeholder feedback by initiating a review of the admission brochure and website content. This approach is professionally sound because it demonstrates a commitment to transparency and continuous improvement. By reviewing and updating the materials to accurately reflect current admission criteria and program details, the university upholds its ethical responsibility to prospective students. This aligns with the principles of fair practice and accurate representation expected of educational institutions, ensuring that students make informed decisions based on reliable information. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the feedback or to make only superficial changes that do not address the core concerns raised by stakeholders. This would be ethically problematic as it fails to rectify potentially misleading information and could lead to continued student dissatisfaction and a breach of trust. Furthermore, such an approach might violate principles of fair advertising and consumer protection, potentially attracting negative attention from regulatory bodies overseeing higher education in India. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the feedback as coming from a minority of stakeholders. This is professionally unsound because it disregards valuable insights that could highlight systemic issues. Ethical decision-making requires considering all feedback, especially when it pertains to the accuracy of information provided to prospective students. Failing to do so can lead to a perception of unresponsiveness and a lack of commitment to student welfare. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, acknowledging and documenting all stakeholder feedback. Second, assessing the validity and potential impact of the feedback. Third, consulting relevant internal policies and external regulatory guidelines. Fourth, developing and implementing corrective actions, such as revising communication materials. Finally, communicating the changes made back to stakeholders to demonstrate responsiveness and a commitment to improvement. Question 18. Stakeholder feedback indicates potential irregularities in the conduct of the Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam, with concerns raised about the fairness and integrity of the examination process. Which of the following approaches best addresses these concerns while upholding the university's commitment to academic excellence and regulatory compliance? Option A. publicly dismiss the allegations as unsubstantiated without conducting any formal inquiry, citing the university's established reputation for fair examinations. Option B. Postpone the announcement of examination results indefinitely until all stakeholder concerns can be informally addressed through individual meetings. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive, impartial investigation into the allegations, gathering all relevant evidence and ensuring due process for all involved before determining appropriate actions. Option D. Immediately disqualify all students who have expressed concerns or been implicated in the feedback from the current and future entrance examinations as a precautionary measure. The correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive, impartial investigation into the allegations, gathering all relevant evidence and ensuring due process for all involved before determining appropriate actions. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the need to address legitimate concerns raised by a significant stakeholder group. The university must act decisively to uphold its standards, while also demonstrating responsiveness and fairness. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any action taken is proportionate, evidence-based, and aligns with the university's established policies and procedures, as well as any relevant regulatory guidelines governing entrance examinations in India, specifically those applicable to Adesh University. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial investigation into the allegations. This means gathering all relevant evidence, including examination scripts, CCTV footage, and statements from invigilators and students. The investigation should be conducted by an independent committee or body to ensure objectivity. This approach is professionally sound because it adheres to principles of due process and fairness. It allows for the identification of any actual irregularities without prejudging the outcome. This aligns with the ethical obligation to maintain the integrity of the examination process and to ensure that all candidates are treated equitably. Furthermore, it is consistent with the general principles of good governance and regulatory compliance expected of educational institutions in India, which emphasize transparency and accountability in examination procedures. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the allegations outright without any investigation. This fails to acknowledge the seriousness of the stakeholder feedback and could lead to a perception of institutional indifference or cover-up. Ethically, it violates the principle of responsiveness to concerns and could erode trust in the university's examination system. It also risks overlooking genuine instances of malpractice, thereby undermining academic standards. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately implement punitive measures against all students involved in the feedback, such as disqualifying them from the entrance exam. This is a failure of due process and fairness, as it assumes guilt without investigation. It is ethically unacceptable to penalize individuals without establishing their culpability. Such an action would also likely violate the university's own examination rules and regulations, which typically mandate a fair hearing or investigation before disciplinary action is taken. A third incorrect approach would be to delay the investigation indefinitely or to conduct it in a secretive manner. This lack of transparency and promptness can exacerbate stakeholder concerns and damage the university's reputation. It suggests a lack of commitment to resolving the issue effectively and ethically. Regulatory frameworks often emphasize timely and transparent grievance redressal mechanisms, which this approach would contravene. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and document all stakeholder feedback promptly. 2. Assess the credibility and seriousness of the allegations. 3. Formulate a clear plan for investigation, including the scope, methodology, and timeline. 4. Establish an independent and impartial body to conduct the investigation. 5. Ensure all parties involved are treated fairly and have an opportunity to present their case. 6. Base any decisions on evidence gathered during the investigation. 7. Communicate the findings and actions taken transparently to relevant stakeholders while respecting privacy where necessary. 8. Review and update examination procedures to prevent future occurrences. Question 19. Stakeholder feedback indicates concerns regarding the perceived fairness and consistency of the Adesh University Bathinda entrance exam administration across different examination centers. Which of the following approaches best addresses these concerns while upholding the integrity of the admission process? Option A. Issue a general statement assuring stakeholders that the examination process is fair and unbiased, without undertaking a specific review. Option B. Immediately increase the number of examination centers for the next cycle to reduce overcrowding and perceived pressure on candidates. Option C. Propose a revision of the admission criteria to accommodate a wider range of applicant profiles, citing the feedback as justification for a less stringent selection process. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of examination protocols, question paper distribution, invigilation procedures, and result tabulation across all centers, followed by targeted training and procedural adjustments based on findings. Correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of examination protocols, question paper distribution, invigilation procedures, and result tabulation across all centers, followed by targeted training and procedural adjustments based on findings. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the university, as an educational institution, has a responsibility to uphold academic integrity and ensure fair admission processes. The feedback highlights a potential conflict between the desire to accommodate a large number of applicants and the need to maintain rigorous admission standards. Navigating this requires a careful balance, adhering to established university policies and regulatory guidelines for entrance examinations. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the examination process, focusing on identifying potential vulnerabilities or areas where the integrity might have been compromised, and then implementing improvements based on evidence. This aligns with the principles of good governance and the regulatory framework governing educational institutions, which mandate transparency, fairness, and accountability in admission procedures. Specifically, it reflects a commitment to continuous improvement and addressing stakeholder concerns through a structured, evidence-based methodology. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on increasing the number of examination centers without investigating the root cause of the feedback would fail to address the underlying issues. This could lead to a superficial solution that doesn't improve the quality or fairness of the examination, potentially exacerbating existing problems or creating new ones. It neglects the responsibility to ensure the validity and reliability of the entrance exam, which is a core ethical and regulatory requirement for universities. Another incorrect approach that involves immediately dismissing the feedback without any form of investigation would be a significant ethical and professional failing. This demonstrates a lack of responsiveness to stakeholders and a disregard for the importance of maintaining trust in the admission process. It also violates the principle of due diligence, which requires institutions to take all reasonable steps to ensure their processes are fair and effective. A third incorrect approach that proposes altering admission criteria retroactively based on the feedback, without a clear and transparent process, would undermine the fairness and predictability of the entrance examination. This could lead to accusations of bias and unfairness, damaging the university's reputation and potentially violating regulatory requirements for standardized admission procedures. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Acknowledging and documenting all stakeholder feedback. 2. Establishing a clear process for investigating the feedback, involving relevant internal committees or external experts if necessary. 3. Analyzing the findings of the investigation to identify root causes and areas for improvement. 4. Developing and implementing evidence-based solutions that align with university policies and regulatory requirements. 5. Communicating the actions taken and the outcomes to stakeholders. Question 20. The audit findings indicate a significant shortfall in projected enrollment figures for the upcoming academic year, leading to pressure from the university administration to relax admission criteria to meet targets. A proposed policy change suggests lowering the minimum score required for certain programs without a formal impact assessment on academic rigor or graduate employability. Which approach best addresses this situation in accordance with the principles of academic integrity and responsible university governance? Option A. Prioritize meeting enrollment targets by adjusting the minimum score without any formal evaluation, assuming that increased student numbers will inherently benefit the university. Option B. Immediately implement the revised admission criteria to address the enrollment shortfall, with a plan to review the impact retrospectively after the academic year. Option C. Rely on anecdotal evidence from faculty members regarding student preparedness and proceed with the admission criteria adjustment based on these informal discussions. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment evaluating the potential effects of lowering admission scores on academic standards, program quality, and long-term graduate outcomes, and present findings to the Academic Council for informed decision-making. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment evaluating the potential effects of lowering admission scores on academic standards, program quality, and long-term graduate outcomes, and present findings to the Academic Council for informed decision-making. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between the university's immediate financial needs and the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of the admission process. The pressure to meet enrollment targets can lead to compromising established academic standards, which is a significant ethical and regulatory concern for any educational institution. Careful judgment is required to balance institutional goals with the paramount duty of upholding academic quality and fairness. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the impact of the proposed policy change on academic standards and the overall quality of the student body. This requires gathering comprehensive data, consulting with relevant academic departments and faculty, and considering the long-term implications for the university's reputation and accreditation. The regulatory framework for university admissions, as implied by an entrance exam context, typically emphasizes fairness, meritocracy, and adherence to established academic criteria. Therefore, an approach that prioritizes a data-driven, evidence-based impact assessment, aligned with these principles, is ethically sound and professionally responsible. It ensures that any policy changes are made with a clear understanding of their consequences, and in a manner that safeguards the academic integrity of Adesh University Bathinda. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on meeting enrollment targets without a rigorous impact assessment fails to acknowledge the potential negative consequences on academic quality. This approach risks undermining the university's reputation and could lead to future issues with accreditation or the recognition of its degrees. It represents an ethical failure to prioritize academic standards over short-term financial or enrollment pressures. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing the policy change without consulting academic stakeholders ignores the expertise and concerns of those directly involved in teaching and curriculum development. This can lead to resistance, a decline in educational quality, and a perception of a lack of transparency and fairness within the university. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for collaborative decision-making and the professional judgment of faculty. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal opinions rather than objective data is inherently flawed. Admissions policies should be based on sound research and measurable outcomes, not subjective impressions. This approach lacks the rigor necessary to ensure fairness and can lead to biased decision-making, which is a direct violation of ethical principles in academic admissions. Professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the core issue and potential conflicts. 2. Understand the relevant regulatory framework and ethical guidelines. 3. Gather objective data and evidence. 4. Consult with all relevant stakeholders. 5. Analyze the potential impacts of different courses of action. 6. Make a decision that aligns with ethical principles and regulatory requirements, prioritizing academic integrity and fairness. 7. Document the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action.